Hey y'all, welcome to this week's show. I'm going to get into 3 interesting medicinal plants this week from my book, The Medicinal Shrubs, and the first 2 are very short entries. The third is really very interesting. It has a really fascinating history. So let's just jump right in here. The first is Lyonia, that's Lyonia, and there are 2 varieties of Lyonia that have documented use in herbal medicine. Lyonia ovalifolia, that's hard to say, ovalifolia, that means basically oval-shaped leaves, and Lyonia mariana. Now 4 varieties though grow in my area. There's Lyonia ligustrina, or Folios flora. I'm just going to give you the common names. These are tongue twisters. Southern Mailberry, Northern Mailberry, Shining Fetterbush, and Staggerbush. That's Lyonia mariana. The mariana, let's see. Let's start with the ovalifolia. According to Plants for Future, the young leaves and buds are toxic, but they are used externally as an infusion to treat skin disease and external parasites. Now, for the mariana, Peterson Field Guide to Eastern and Central Medicinal Plants says, Staggerbush, the Cherokee used the leaf tea externally for itching ulcers. Benjamin Smith Barton, in his classic essay Towards the Materia Medica of the United States in 1801, wrote that a leaf tea was used as a wash for disagreeable ulcerations of the feet. Very interesting. Now, it is poisonous, and the reason it's called Staggerbush is because it produces staggers in livestock. So we don't want to use either of these internally, but apparently very useful externally. Now, another one that has a great name, but doesn't have a lot of documented medicinal use, is Rattlesnake Master. You got to love the name of that plant. It's Manfreda virginica, Manfreda virginica. Only one variety of Manfreda is known to herbal medicine, and it is a uniquely New World herb. It's one of the many that were introduced to the colonists by Native Americans as useful to treat snake bites. Several herbs have similar common names. You'll see all kinds of rattlesnake this and that. All of those were used by Native Americans for snake bite, and that's where the common name comes from when they were introduced to the colonists. Peterson Field Guide for Eastern Central Medicinal Plants tells us this one. American Indians use the diuretic root tea for dropsy. That's edema, that's fluid in the limbs. Wash was used for snake bites. Roots were nibbled for severe diarrhea, worms, and used as a laxative. Like certain species of agave, this plant may be used as a source for steroid synthesis. Yes, there are some plants, of course the most famous being wild yam, that have certain soapy-like compounds in them, and they can be used to make synthetic hormones with. We don't do that as herbalists. Now, this plant does have a latex-like sap, and that can be irritating. And don't confuse it with Rattlesnake Master, another plant by the same name, which is Orangium yucifolium. So there are at least two plants called Rattlesnake Master, and then you have Rattlesnake Plantain, and you have probably 5 or 7 different ones just called Snake Root. So be careful in your identification there. Now the last, and this is by far the most interesting, Myrica. Now there are 10 varieties of Myrica that have documented use in herbal medicine. And let's see, bayberry is probably the most common. There's several varieties of bayberry. Here in America, we normally use the California bayberry, but in early America, the ones that were growing in the bays, essentially, Virginia and North Carolina were very much used, well up into the New England states. There's Myrica pennsylvanica, that's northern bayberry, so that one was growing in Pennsylvania. There's a Chinese one that's been introduced. There are a lot of them. Another one that's really famous is Myrica gale. It was much used in ancient herbal medicine in Europe and England, and yeah, and we'll get into that one. The only variety that's native to my region is the legendary Myrica gale. In fact, it's sweet gale, and I say legendary because this was one of the herbs used to brew the highly intoxicating and somewhat hallucinogenic beer of ancient Europe before St. Hildegard von Bingen introduced hops. These beers were used to enhance battle fervor. They were used for rivalry. They were said to cause severe hangovers. And both religious and civil authorities sought, really encouraged the use of hops in place of those herbs in beer. That beer was called Groot, because it was known to cause violent riots and rampages. So yeah, they had a real good reason to get people to stop drinking the beer that made them hallucinate and fight each other, and start drinking the beer that made them sedate. But what can we say? Then, not too much longer, the Europeans invented, world wars, soccer matches with soccer hooligans beating the crap out of each other, drinking regular beer, and my favorite heavy metal band, Motorhead. Okay, so for my younger readers, Motorhead was a band that their first album debuted in 1977, the greatest heavy metal rock band, hard heavy metal rock band of all time, and can generally engender into a person listening to them the same states of mind as Groot. I mean, it's really intense, adrenaline fueled, serious heavy metal. I mean, if you're thinking heavy metal is like, AC/DC or Black Sabbath, you have not heard Motorhead. They were the greatest of all time. But anyway, some sources say that Myrica pennsylvanica, which is also called Myrica carolinensis, so it grows both in probably the mountains of North Carolina and in Pennsylvania, because we have the Appalachians growing through there. They say it grows in both places, but honestly, I have not found it in North Carolina yet. So a lot of books say that the pennsylvanica also grows in Carolina and goes under the name of carolinensis, but I have not found one, and y'all know I'm out looking for plants all the time. But now, going back to the Myrica gale, Dioscorides wrote of Myrica as myrrhus in ancient Greece, 2,500 years ago. He said it is a well-known tree growing in marshy ground and standing waters, with a fruit and flower of a mossy consistency. Some say it's planted in gardens in Egypt. We'll get on to the medicinal doses. He said it bears a fruit like a gall, which is like the little wasp nest on an oak tree. It says it is unequally astringent to the taste and used instead of galls for the mouth, eyes, and spitting of blood. It is given in drink to women troubled with colic and those who have vaginal discharge, sickness of the head, and those bitten by harvest spiders. Very important. This was actually, harvest spiders have a necrotizing venom like a black widow or a brown recluse, and this is really one of the best treatments for those bites. and because it is very astringent, and it pulls down that swelling, and it can help stop the tissue destroying properties. But on its own, it's really not good enough, because that necrotizing venom, it really just starts breaking down the hyaluronic acid in the cells. The best thing is echinacea in any form you can get it, really. But that's what they used to call snake oil, because it was also used against the necrotizing venom of certain snakes, like rattlesnakes and copperheads and such as that. Good to keep a good, really strong astringent like Myrica on hand, or like oak bark galls. Really pull down that swelling very quickly, tighten up that tissue. But you're also going to want to internally take whatever form of echinacea you can get, really. And the stronger the better. And you can use it externally as well, and it will help a lot. It really just protects hyaluronic acid. That's the secret of how it is used for snake bite and such. And then a drawing poultice. It can be anything from a split prickly pear cactus pad to charcoal or clay. Anything that can help just draw that the pus, the venom, everything that's sitting there is really nasty that needs to come out of there. It's amazing how it works. It doesn't seem like it should work, but the body kind of puts the swelling in that area to kind of keep the venom localized. And if you can pull it out with a drawing poultice, it can really make all the difference. He says that as a poultice, it stops edema. The bark does the same thing as well as fruit. A decoction of the leaves taken as a drink with wine would reduce inflammation of the spleen, and gargling in the mouth helps toothache. For hip baths, good again for discharges, and a heated rub is good for those with lice and nits. Ash from the wood applied stops flows from the uterus. There are some who make cups from the wood, which they use for those troubled with the spleen. Now this is very interesting. A wooden cup made with the wood of Myrica gale had that same reducing quality to spleenal inflammation. And he said the drink given them from such cups do them good. Now, this herb was also known, of course, in Native American medicine. It's not just a European plant. As I said, it's native to my area. The Lumbee used both the Myrica gale and the red myrtle. I believe they used the Myrica gale, and know they used the red myrtle. It's Myrica cerifera. That's also known as candleberry. That would have been more in their region. But anyway, red myrtle leaves were used for improving the flavor of other herbs, and it does have an aromatic, spicy quality to it. It was combined with a form of tansy, which we don't much use anymore. Tansy has a toxicity to it, so can Myrica actually. But it was used to treat problems of the digestive system, the mouth, the esophagus, and the stomach, to treat itching. The Lumbee would use a leaf infusion in a bath or as a wash. Stomach ulcers were treated by chewing a piece of the root recently taken from the ground. And an herbalist named Lucy May Locklear, a Lumbee elder, boiled the leaves of this tree, which she called the myrtle tree, into a tea to treat whooping cough. And that's actually what I remember it being called when I was a child, the myrtle tree. I grew up in that area about half of my childhood. The Choctaw would use red myrtle leaves and stems in an infusion to nurse fevers and sore throat. Towards an American Materia Medica is a really fascinating book. We mentioned we've already mentioned this one, haven't we? Yes, it was written in about 1800. It was one of the first herbal books written in America that was combining both the native plants along with the European herbal medicine, and that's why it's called the Eclectic School of Medicine. And it states that the Myrica cerifera, or candleberry myrtle, deserves to be mentioned. This is a common shrub in many of the maritime parts of the United States, New Jersey to Delaware, etc., and also all the way down to North Carolina. This is unquestionably a very powerful astringent, and as such has been employed by the country practitioners of the United States. A decoction of the bark of the root is employed, sometimes alone and sometimes in combination with the bark of the root of persimmon, Now, persimmon is also very astringent. We'll cover that on another day. It's, again, one of my favorite herbs to use. Or with the bark of the black alder, and they said either on itself or combined, the decoction of Myrica has been used with much advantage in dropsical affections, that's again edema, succeeding to intermittence. That means basically malarial conditions, intermittent fevers. And it was particularly used for that in the peninsula of Delaware, where dropsies in various shapes are more common than any other part of North America. That's odd, but what it was they had a major outbreak of a malarial type infection, and it left the body weakened and more likely to retain fluids, and this was one of the treatments they used it. And so likewise, the root has likewise been found useful in the treatment of hemorrhages from the uterus especially. It was remarked by an old physician that had much experience in the use of this plant that it often acted as a gentle purgative. So it also apparently has some laxative properties while being astringent. So that's pretty interesting. They mentioned that several varieties of Myrica are listed by botanists, and he gets into some of the ones he had seen in America. And then he gets to the Myrica gale, also called Dutch myrtle or American bog gale. It is likewise used in the United States. But this, he actually says it's so famous that he didn't have to write about it. Linnaeus and other writers had already handled it. It continued to be very popular, especially the bayberry. And really in coastal Virginia and North Carolina sprung up whole factories making bayberry candles. It was actually a very important export at one point in the country. Colonial America, every household would have had bayberry scented candles. It's the Thomsonians writing, I'm going to say probably around 1820 and 1850, said this is a species of myrtle from which wax is obtained from the berries and grows common in many parts of this country. It is a shrub growing from 2 to 4 feet high, easily known by the berries. And if you've ever been around boggy areas and bays, you can pretty much spot this one. You get used to it. It's really common. Let's see what he says about it medicinally. Talks about how you should dry the berries and ground them into a fine powder and keep it as a medicine on hand. It says in diarrhea or chronic cholera and goiter, it is one of the best agents. Its influence on the uterus is very positive. In prolapsus, it is splendid, and in parturition, it cannot be well excelled. It induces better contractions when given near the end of confinement, and should there be excessive lochia, it will stop the excess. Its influence is also good in excessive menstruation and hemorrhages. So, good herb to have on hand for that reason. In hot infusion, it gradually arouses the circulation and favors an outward flow of blood. A good free perspiration will follow, which will be more abundant if zingiber, that's ginger, is added. Actually, the Latin name of ginger is much more fun to say than the English name. It's zingiber, Zingiber. When the stomach is very foul, it will frequently operate as an emetic. So combined with ginger, it could actually help you throw up and get rid of a sick stomach. In connection with lobelia, it is used in producing emesis, so it can bring on menstruation. Very valuable in the treatment of conditions found in scrofula and secondary syphilis. For emetic purposes, it should be given with lobelia in a hot infusion, that's a tea, and is excellent to rid the system of impurities. Now, by the 1860s or so, it was listed in Resources of the Southern Fields and Forests, saying that the species all had similar properties. So, they probably are fairly interchangeable, but specifically bayberry said it was astringent and stimulant, and in large doses brings on menstruation, successfully employed in scrofula, jaundice, diarrhea and dysentery, and other diseases where an astringent stimulant is indicated, beneficial as a gargle in a sore mouth and throat. For sweet gale, it says astringent, stimulant, etc. Yeah, it's looking pretty interchangeable. King's Medical Dispensatory of 1898 lists some different varieties, some that are in the bays and some that are in dry fields from Florida to Canada. So you should be able to find a variety of Myrica somewhere, wherever you live. Let's see. He talks about the bark and how to, the root bark and how to collect it, the wax myrtle, how to collect the wax, the chemical compositions. All right, here we go. Actions, medicinal uses, and dosages. Bayberry bark is astringent and stimulant, and as such is valuable in debilitated conditions of the mucous membranes. Act to occasion emesis. It was largely employed by the followers of Samuel Thompson, those are the Thompsonians, in catarrhal states of the alimentary tract, essentially mucus in your intestines. The bark has been successfully employed in scrofula, jaundice, diarrhea, dysentery, aphtha, and other diseases where astringent stimulants were indicated. Specifically, Myrica in small doses will be found a good stimulant to the nerves, aiding the process of digestion, blood making, and nutrition. In larger doses, it is a decided gastric stimulant. In small doses, it has been found advantageous in chronic gastritis, chronic catarrhal diarrhea, mucoenteritis, in dysentery having a typhoid character. It is said to restore arrested lochial discharge. Cases calling for Myrica show feeble venous action while the pulse is full and oppressed. It is not adapted to acute disorders of the alimentary tract as a rule. A weak infusion is an admirable remedy for amenorrhea and atonic leukorrhea. Powdered bark combined with bloodroot, another plant we've discussed many times, sanguinaria, form an excellent application to indolent ulcers and has likewise been employed as a snuff for the cure of some forms of nasal polyps. I don't think that would be very pleasant, okay? The bloodroot is a really unique plant. It's actually in the opium poppy family, and it has a caustic sap. People would put it on warts and such, or ulcerated sores and such. It numbs the area out because it's got a certain morphine type quality to it, while kind of burning away whatever you put it on. Combined with the Myrica and that astringency, I can see that would shrink the polyp, and then the bloodroot would kind of burn it away. Any way you look at it, not your best option these days. Definitely not your best option. Your best, definitely on that one, you want to go to an ear, nose, and throat specialist. Maybe be a little sedated and have it cauterized. You'd be bleeding a lot from the nose. I guess the Myrica, the astringency would probably shrink the capillaries to reduce the bleeding, but you'd have some serious sores in your sinus cavity, which would not be fun. Let's see. Decoction beneficial as a gargle in sore mouth and throat. Good for leukorrhea and fistula as an injection. Also as a wash for ulcers. Forms an excellent gum wash for tender, spongy, and bleeding gums. The leaves are reputed astringent and are useful in scurvy and spasmodic affections. It lists the Myrica pennsylvanica, the carolinensis, the Myrica gale, with similar properties to bayberry and wax myrtle, and lists a lot of entries by different physicians of how they've used it in medical journals. Specific indications for profuse mucus flows, catarrhal states of the gastrointestinal tract, atonic diarrhea, typhoid dysentery, atony of the cutaneous circulation, full oppressed pulse, used locally and internally for sore mouth, spongy, flabby, bleeding gums, sore throat from scarlet fever, especially when enfeebled and swollen, and gives related species, the American gale, the Linnaea, the sweet gale, the Dutch myrtle. Some grown says the swamps of the Carolinas and swampy areas up to Canada, and others in drier areas. So, and many on the coast as well. And a lot that we've not even mentioned. One that grows in Brazil, that was made apparently a very good wax, and one from Japan that was very waxy as well. So Jethro Kloss wrote of bayberry, Myrica cerifera. Gives a lot of names for it. He used the bark, leaves, and flowers as an astringent, tonic for the digestive system, and a stimulant. The leaves are aromatic as stimulant, and they are very aromatic. They're very nice. I'm a little allergic to them, so I don't get to enjoy them that way. But if you do, get yourself some bayberry candles. They're really great, and they have a really interesting colonial history. He says that this is one of the most valuable and useful herbs. The tea is most excellent gargle for sore throat. It will thoroughly cleanse the throat of all putrid matter. Steep a teaspoonful in boiling water for 30 minutes and gargle until the throat is clear. And drink a pint of lukewarm tea to thoroughly cleanse the stomach. If it does not come up easily, tickle the back of the throat. In other words, he was saying use it to make you throw up. This restores the mucus secretions to normal activity. For chills, make a tea as given in the preceding paragraph, adding a pinch of cayenne, and take a half a cup warm every hour. That's actually an old Thompsonian remedy with this tea made from the Myrica, which is warming in itself, and then a pinch of cayenne pepper. The Thompsonians were up in, I think, New Hampshire before modern heating and furnaces. They were very cold, so they were very interested in using cayenne pepper and other warming herbs to help with chills and fevers and arthritic conditions and such as that. Said bayberry is an excellent emetic after narcotic poisoning of any kind. Let me get a sip of water here. Let's try that again. Bayberry is an excellent emetic for narcotic poisoning of any kind. It is good to follow the bayberry with an emetic such as lobelia. Now, an emetic is what makes you throw up. And they're saying if somebody took anything that had a narcotic property, they were basically overdosing, inducing vomiting, using bayberry and lobelia would be the go-to for Samuel Thompson. Said bayberry is also valuable when taken in the usual manner for all kinds of hemorrhages, whether from the stomach, lungs, excessive menstruation, and when combined with capsicum, again that's cayenne pepper, it is an unfailing remedy for this. Very good in leukorrhea, has a general effect on the female organs, and has an excellent influence on the uterus during pregnancy. Well, let's get that with a grain of salt there. As I always say, I don't recommend any herbs during pregnancy, and as this one has in certain doses the ability to bring on menstruation, it could also cause a miscarriage, so let's stay away from that advice. Excellent results will be obtained from its use in goiter, diarrhea, and dysentery, and use of the tea as an enema. For gangrenous sores, boils, and carbuncles, use a wash and poultice, applying the powdered bayberry to the infection. The tea is an excellent wash for spongy and bleeding gums. The tea taken internally is useful in jaundice, scrofula, canker sores of the throat and mouth. A tea taken warm promotes perspiration and improves the whole circulation and tones up the tissue. Taken in combination with yarrow, catnip, sage, or peppermint, it is unexcelled for colds. Yeah, very popular. That's a really common old cold remedy. Yarrow, catnip, sage, peppermint, with a little bit of bay. Now remember, too much of it's going to make you throw up. And this is another one. Definitely you don't want to be using sage, peppermint, and the Myrica during pregnancy, not in a medicinal dose anyway. A little bit of sage in your sausage, or a little bit of peppermint in your candy, certainly not going to hurt anything, but medicinal doses are different. An excellent formula made with bayberry and used by the famous Dominion Herbal College for colds, fevers, flu, colic, cramps, and pains of the stomach is 4 ounces bayberry, 2 ounces ginger, 1 ounce white pine, 1 dram of cloves, and 1 dram of capsicum or cayenne. That's also going to be very warming, going to be very good for fevers and such. And that was just used basically as a hot tea, and or it could be taken in capsule form. That's interesting as well. Bradford Angier, who was a real character. I don't quote from Bradford Angier enough. He was an outdoor writer in the probably 30s through 50s, bit of a plagiarist, but a real character. He wrote, his most famous book is How to Stay Alive in the Woods. That was actually used in a movie not too long ago, a Robert Redford movie. But anyway, he wrote a lot on herbs. He was a pretty good herbalist, and his wife was a very good illustrator. And during a time, this is, between the the big push in the 19-teens and 20s to make herbal medicine illegal, and before the hippies got all interested in it in the 60s, and before Yule Gibbons even brought it back in the early 60s and late 50s, I guess. Bradford Angier was one of the only guys writing books on herbal medicine and field guides to help you learn how to identify the plants. He said that the base of the bark, best secured during the latter part of autumn, was often gathered by bringing in the entire root, washing and scrubbing it diligently, and then, while still fresh, separating the bark with a hammer or by pounding it and grinding the whole plant between two stones. Others went to the trouble of stripping small shreds from the still growing roots. The bark in any event was kept in a dry place, when dehydrated, and then pulverized. The resulting powder was thoroughly dried and kept in a dark place in a sealed jar or bottle. The powdered bark was then steeped or boiled. The former process by stirring a teaspoon of the ingredient into a cup of steaming hot water, allowing this to cool, and then, when it was cold, drinking 1 or 2 cups full a day. The latter produced by simmering an ounce of the powdered bark in 2 cups of bubbling water and imbibing it while still warm. So it has different uses whether hot or cold, essentially. The outstanding characteristic of both infusions was a marked astringency. It was used in cases of diarrhea and dysentery, both as an enema and a drink. In large doses, it was sometimes employed as an emetic, would make you throw up, in other words, particularly since it had an agreeable aromatic scent and a spirited medicinal taste. It was favored as a mouthwash, especially when cankers were present, and the gums sore or bleeding, and as a gargle for sore throats. The tea was also deemed efficacious in cases of jaundice. It was sometimes used, too, to treat uterine hemorrhage. The powder used as a snuff was excellent for catarrh and for cleansing the nasal congestion. The powder was also used to treat boils, carbuncles, and milder sores, being directly applied to the afflicted part. It was useful in poultices for cuts and bruises, troublesome scratches, and insect bites. The leaves and stem of bay were boiled in water and drunk both to allay a fever and in stronger doses to eliminate worms in the intestinal tract. The leaves with their vitamin C cured and prevented scurvy, and the berries were used to relieve flatulence and to ease cold symptoms. A lot of great home remedies there. Plants for a Future says of bog myrtle, the leaves can cause a miscarriage. They give a big warning on that, so let's just keep that in mind. Are aromatic, astringent, menagogue, which means brings on menses, and stomatic. The leaves are normally used as a tea, but they do not contain a poisonous aromatic oil. But they do contain, let's get that right. The leaves are normally used as a tea, but they do contain a poisonous aromatic oil, so some caution is advised in their use. And of the northern bayberry, they said the root bark is astringent and emetic in large doses. A tea made from the leaves is used in treatment of fevers and externally as a wash for itchy skin. Peterson Field Guide for Eastern and Central Medicinal Plants says of the wax myrtle, Myrica cerifera, wax was produced from the fruit. Root bark formerly used in tea as astringent and emetic for chronic gastritis, diarrhea, dysentery, leukorrhea, catarrhal states of the alimentary tract, jaundice, scrofula, indolent or hard-to-heal ulcers. Leaf tea was used for fevers, externally as a wash for itching. Powdered root bark was an ingredient in a composition powder that was once a widely used home remedy for colds and chills. That's actually the powder, the recipe we just gave you. Says warning, wax is irritating, and constituents of the wax are reportedly carcinogenic. The Myrica gale or sweet gale, similar uses to those of Cerifera. Branch tea was once used as a diuretic for gonorrhea. Warning, essential oil is reportedly toxic, and basically all essential oils have a toxicity to them. I'm always warning people, you don't want to be taking essential oils internally, certainly not straight, or even applying them to your skin without weakening them down with some neutral oil like olive oil or something. But it has been found to inhibit the growth of various bacteria. The Myrica pennsylvanica, which may also be the Caroliniensis if it actually exists, same use for M. cerifera. The Micmac tribe used to make a snuff of the leaves, a fine powder, and sniff it up the nose for headaches. The leaf tea was used as a stimulant, and poultice root bark for inflammation. Warning, the wax is considered toxic. And finally, it's actually still listed in the physician's desk reference for herbal medicine, and it states of the Myrica cerifera, the active compounds have diaphoretic, stimulant, and astringent effects. So I think we'll wrap it up there. 3 really interesting plants, certainly all useful in their own way, but the Myrica, fascinating history, especially in the beers of Europe and all the old herbal preparations, but also in the history of the United States and the colonies, the use of the wax and everything, not just for medicinal properties, but making candles and such. If you had gone into any home in, say, colonial Williamsburg, it would have smelled of bayberry candles made with a combination of probably a bayberry and beef tallow. So you would have kind of gotten a smell of like McDonald's French fries and bayberry, which probably fairly appetizing actually. So anyway, y'all, have a great week, and I'll talk to you next time.
The information in this podcast is not intended to diagnose or treat any disease or condition. Nothing I say or write has been evaluated or approved by the FDA. I'm not a doctor. The U.S. government does not recognize the practice of herbal medicine, and there is no governing body regulating herbalists. Therefore, I'm really just a guy who studies herbs. I'm not offering any advice. I won't even claim that anything I write or say is accurate or true. I can tell you what herbs have been traditionally used for. I can tell you my own experience and if I believe an herb has helped me. I cannot nor would I tell you to do the same. If you use an herb anyone recommends, you are treating yourself. You take full responsibility for your health. Humans are individuals and no two are identical. What works for me may not work for you. You may have an allergy, a sensitivity, an underlying condition that no one else even shares and you don't even know about. Be careful with your health. By continuing to listen to my podcast or read my blog, you agree to be responsible for yourself, for your own research, make your own choices, and not to blame me for anything ever.